नमिता प्रणमामि सदा मीरा.
Sri Aurobindo's Letters on Savitri, edited by K.D. Setnam. Sri Aurobindo's Letters on Savitri. Publishers note Sri Aurobindo wrote these letters on Savitri during the years 1930s and 40s. Editor's note to the 1951 edition. Editor's note to the 1951 edition. Sri Aurobindo intended to write a long introduction to Savitri, a legend and a symbol, together with one book out of the 12 of his epic. Significantly enough, the Book of Death, the eagerly awaited introduction, never got written. Nothing that anybody may pen, however acute, can replace it as an expository and illuminative document on the unusual poetic afflatus, unusual both in message and music, that blows through the 25,000 and odd lines of this legend of the past that is a symbol of the future. But luckily, we have a substantial number of letters by Sri Aurobindo on what can be called, if any one achievement by so vastly and variously creative, a genius can lay claim to the title, his literary life work. Out of these letters in an ordinary or introductory ensemble, necessarily in certain places more informal, personal, unreserved, focused on details, quick, shifting, repetitive than a specially composed piece for the public would be, has been made with the object of throwing in the poet's own valuable words some light on the poem's conception and development and its qualities of inspiration, vision, and technique. It will perhaps be of interest to touch upon the origin of the series of the notes that have been compiled and presented here. No sooner, says Dr. Setna, no sooner did I commence my contact with Sri Aurobindo in 1927 than I found the air of the ashram humming with rich rumors of the masterpiece that had been in progress ever since his days in Baroda. Having always had a passion for poetry and having myself tried to catch a spark of the celestial fire, I was extremely thrilled and longed to set eyes on this most significant work of his, which he was repeatedly recasting to make it accord with the ever higher ascension of his own consciousness in yoga. But Sri Aurobindo was in no hurry to show it before it reached the intensest spiritual perfection. It was I, on the contrary, who kept showing him my own little efforts at expressing the few strange glimmers of beauty and truth that at times my discipleships under so gracious a spiritual and literary guru brought me. On one such occasion, to illustrate some point, he sent me back with his helpful comments 2 lines describing the ray from the transcendent penetrating through the mind's passive neutral reflection of the supreme quietude of the silent Brahman. They ran, piercing the limitless unknowable, breaking the vacancy and voiceless peace. I was struck by the profound word reverberations that reinforced the mystical word suggestions with the tremendous immediacy of the spiritual fact. I asked where the lines came from. The reply was Savitri. I never forget this first brief impact of the closely guarded secret. Even before it, Sri Aurobindo had tried to make me conscious of a certain element in poetry that hailed from what he called the overhead planes, the hidden ranges of consciousness above the intellect, with their inherent light of knowledge and their natural experience of the infinite. He distinguished 4 planes: higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, overmind. The last named has been, according to him, the top reach of a dynamic side of man's spirituality so far. A transcendental poise of immutable Brahman or featureless nirvana is the beyond to it usually realized when in isolated cases there is a leap to the ultimate status of that infinite silence of self-liberation which can be attained on any plane of the cosmos by an inner withdrawal, the master dynamism of the divine, the integral earth transformative power which Sri Aurobindo designated as supermind or gnosis or truth consciousness, and which has his own outstanding personal realization, rendering his yoga a unique hope for the world, has lain unmanifest and mostly unseized, and until certain radical conditions are completely fulfilled, cannot find direct expression in life or literature. Even the expression of the overmind, with its massive and comprehensive yet intensely immediate vision, especially in the entire authenticity of its undertones and overtones of rhythm, is rare, as is also to a less degree that of the higher mind's broad connective clarity, the illumined mind's many sided opulence of colorful insight, the intuition's swift and close and all seizing focus. What the ancients termed the mantra, the stuff of divinity itself, appearing to become revelatory scriptural world as in some parts of the Vedas, the Upanishads and the Gita, is the clearest voice of the overmind in its past visitations on earth. Less openly, the overmind is the chief presence in the world's greatest poetic phrases of various types. More and more, Sri Aurobindo sought, by patiently criticizing, appraising, distinguishing, to help me not only respond in my appreciation of poetry to the rising scale of the overhead note, but also bring some strain of it into my own verses. The quest of that note grew for me a dominant occupation, and I prayed for a touch of the overmind. One day, emboldened by his innumerable favors of tutorship, I made a singular request. I wrote, I shall consider it a favor indeed if you will give me an instance in English of the inspiration of the pure overmind. I don't mean just a line like Milton's. Those thoughts that wander through eternity, or words, voyaging to strange seas of thought alone, which has a brief burst of it, but something sustained and plenary. I want to steep my consciousness in its rhythm and its revelation. It will be a most cherished possession. Please don't disappoint me by saying that as no English writer has a passage of this kind, you cannot do anything for me. He wrote back in his characteristic vein. Good heavens, how am I to avoid saying that when it is the only possible answer, at least so far as I can remember? Perhaps if I went through English poetry again with my present consciousness, I might find more intimations like that line of Wordsworth. But a passage sustained and plenary? These surely are things yet to come, the future poetry perhaps, but not the past. With the familiarity, almost the impudence, he permitted us, I replied. I think the favor I asked was expressed in perfectly clear language. If no English poet has produced the passage I want, then who has done so in English? God alone knows, but who is capable of doing it? All of us know. Well, then why not be kind enough to grant this favor? If difficult meters could be illustrated on demand, is it impossible to illustrate in a satisfying measure something so naturally Arabindonian as the overmind? I am not asking for hundreds of lines, even 8 will more than do, all pure gold to be treasured forever. So please, perhaps it is possible only on Sunday, the day dedicated to the golden Surya, and rich for you with leisure from correspondence. I can wait answerless for 24 hours with a sweet Samatha. The answer came the very next morning. I have to say good heavens again, because difficult meters can be illustrated on demand, which is a matter of metrical skill. How does it follow that one can produce poetry from any blessed plane on demand? It would be easier to furnish you with hundreds of lines already written, out of which you could select for yourself anything overmindish if it exists, which I doubt, rather than produce 8 lines of warranted overmind manufactured to order. All I can do is to give you from time to time some lines from Savitri, on condition you keep them to yourself for the present. It may be a poor substitute for the overmental, but if you like the sample, these opening lines I can give you more hereafter and occasionally better. And then, with an example, they followed his own five insensitive yet forceful hands 16 lines of the very first canto of Savitri as it stood then. It was the hour before the gods awake. It was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine event, the huge unslumbering spirit of night, alone in the unlit temple of immensity, lay stretched immobile upon silence march, mute with the unplumbed permission of her change. The impassive skies were neutral, waste and still. Then a faint hesitating glimmer broke, a slow miraculous gesture dimly came, the incessant thrill of a transfiguring touch persuaded the inert black quietude, and beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God. A wandering hand of pale enchanted light that glowed along the moment's fading brink, fixed with gold panel and opulent hinge, a gate of dreams azar on mysteries word.